Hello, and welcome to Google Sheets Fun with Dr. Coates, where we are going to learn how to add three data sets to this scatter plot so that we can have a linear regression trend line in this region, a linear regression trend line in this region. So this took a little bit of time to figure out, but now once I figured it out, Google Sheets is playing very nicely. So the only way you can do this is following the similar protocol to that outlined in the worksheet for experiment number 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to, now that we've made a nice scatter plot, I don't want a line plot. I've constrained my bounds so that I can really see where my areas are. What I'm going to do is I want to keep my x-axis the same for everything, because that's where Google Sheets gets really mad at you if you don't do that. And I'm just going to copy my y-axis, my temperature data. Okay? So now what I'm doing is I'm actually going to say I want my linear regression analysis curve to start here and at time 0 and go down to about, I don't know, let's say time 120. Okay? So time 0 to time 120. I don't want anything after that, so I'm going to delete all of the temperature data after time 120. In my second curve area, or my second linear regression trendline area, I want to have no data that's before. Let's go with 195. So looking at that point right there, I'm going to go to time 195 and I'm going to delete all of the temperature data before that time. Okay, and so now at this time, what I can do is I can go back to my plot. If I double click on my plot, it brings up my chart editor. And what I want to do for this is I want to go in and I want to set up, here, let me move my recording off to the side. I'm going to set up my chart. So right now what it says is my x-axis, you cannot add more x-axes, so my x-axis has to be column A in all of that data. But I only have one series for my y-axis, and that's just my raw data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another series. So I'm going to add another series. You select this box here. It says select range, and I'm going to select the data for series my linear regression 2. Now the trick here is you got to make sure you select all the data, even the blank cells, so that you keep the X and Y range the same. So at that point, I say, okay, now this new red data is my linear regression curve 2. If you wanted to, now you have this data, you can go back in and add it if you want to extend that curve a little bit too. So in fact, I'm going to do that. I think that we could have a nice curve here. Maybe not that last point, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete the first point because I think that might mess up my trend line, and we'll see that later. Okay, so I go back into my chart editor setup. I want to add a third series, so I click on the select data range. I want my third series. Again, we're going to include even the blank points for column D, which has my third series. I've got this red data here. Looks like I went too far. I'm now in the curve. I don't want that. I want a nice flat line, but I can easily go in and just delete that point. If I wanted to add it back in, I've got my raw data over here in column B. So now I've got 3 data sets, and they're all individual. So now I can actually apply my trend lines to these data sets. I'm going to go and I'm going to select the red data set for my linear regression area 1. I'm in customize at this point. If you scroll down and customize, you get to this option right here for trend line. I click trend line. All it does is it gives me a trend line. I need to actually scroll down even further and use an equation. So now it gives me the equation up here in the legend. Okay? And at this point, it looks like I don't have a very good fit to my data, probably because I included those 2 points. But I can go back in and I can just delete those 2 points, and now I get a much better fit. But this is really nice where you can see this and you can go in and you can edit your trend lines and the data that you selected. So I'll go back to my data set, data series 3. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to add my trend line, and I'm going to use my equation as the label in the legend. Okay, so at this point now I have a trend line for each one of my series. I've got them labeled, they're forecasted, and I have their equations. So now I can set them equal to each other, solve for x, determine the time at which stearic acid had its melting point. Therefore, I can determine the temperature by plugging x back into one of the equations. Okay, so it's pretty simple. Google Sheets is friendly as long as you make sure that you do all of the correct x-axes. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know, and don't hesitate to email or stop by my office hours. All right. Good luck.